Hi, this is Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair, and today I want to talk to you about the right to repair movement. So as you can probably guess from the title of my channel, I like to fix phones. Well, it's what I do for a living, and I need to be able to keep doing that, or else find another job, I suppose. So what I want to ask you, first of all, is how long do you think you can live without your phone? And I'm asking you that for a reason. Think about that for a minute while I try to explain why that's relevant to this video. So first of all, there was an article that came out in Mashable last week that caught my attention. It was obvious clickbait, but still, when I read it, I did have the reaction that they were probably looking for, which was, this is ridiculous. So the title of this article was, "No, you shouldn't be allowed to fix your own phone. Right to repair is a dumb idea." So immediately I thought, wow, this is ridiculous that someone is saying that. But then I started thinking about it, in Mashable being a somewhat reputable publication, it's dangerous for people to start perpetuating these sort of ideas. So I want to talk a little bit about how I feel about this, how it affects what I do for a living, and how it will also affect you if you own a phone. So obviously I need to be able to fix phones. And the main reason that I created this channel was to assist other people in case they had a problem with their phone and they wanted to be able to fix it. And this is something that's been going on throughout history. You know, you buy something, whether it was 200 or 1,000 years ago, and later on you might need to have it serviced. And in order to do that, if you've got the tools, the knowledge, and the willingness to take any risks associated with that, why should you not be able to work on something that you purchased? Well, of course, big manufacturers don't always tend to see things the same way that we do. So first of all, let's address phones in general. By definition, a public utility is a business that furnishes an everyday necessity to the public at large. And the reason this is important is because phones are different than a lot of other devices. They're not something that is really a luxury. Nowadays, if you don't have a cell phone, there are a lot of things you can't do, and that can include being employed, for one thing, reaching out to emergency services and a number of other communications that you need to be able to make living in this day and age. So fortunately, we have some regulations that govern these types of devices, and they set strict rules in place as to what people are allowed to do. Now, again, I'm all for the idea that with free enterprise, you make something and you should be able to profit from that thing if you sell it to other people. But in this arena, when we're dealing with something that is a public utility, we need to have regulations that prevent manufacturers from basically exploiting their customers. So you shouldn't make it any more difficult or costly than it needs to be in order to have a remedy available when people want to fix something that's been damaged. Now, of course, Apple has announced that they will be fighting any right to repair legislation. And that's bad news for us because Apple has lots of money and lots of resources available to be able to push whatever agenda it is they happen to support. And I wouldn't necessarily expect any other manufacturer to do anything different. Now, we have gone, throughout the last few years. I found this out in 2012 real quickly. I went onto an Apple support forum and someone had a problem and I tried to offer them a solution. Well, that solution was not take your phone to Apple or send your phone to Apple. So it immediately got deleted. And I quickly realized that anytime you're dealing with something that is highly affected by loyalty. So when someone buys into a certain ideology or to a certain brand name or a certain philosophy, if you are going to debate them or you're going to offer a different idea, you can't really do it on their turf. You don't go into someone's house and try to convince everyone there that what the person who owns that house believes in is wrong. You go out into a public forum or you go somewhere else and debate it, but you're going to have a hard time going onto Facebook and convincing your friends who don't agree with your political opinions that they should change their position and believe something different. It just doesn't work. They unfollow you, and in the case of a forum that is loyal to Apple, they're going to have moderators that say, no, you're not allowed to talk here because you're not saying the same thing that we do. So that's understandable, and I would recommend that no one really wastes their time. For those of you who are trying to convince people in these forums of otherwise, I do admire your efforts, but I really think that you could spend your time more effectively elsewhere where people are actually going to listen to what you have to say. Now, one of One problem within the phone repair industry is the same thing that happens with pretty much technology in general, and that is growth tends to outpace legislation. So we don't have laws on the books that are caught up to the type of technology that we have available to us today. The legal system in this country tends to move a bit on the slow side, but with good reason. We don't want anyone to jump in and change a law right away that doesn't make sense and then have to change it again next week. So it does take time for these to happen. But fortunately, there is a movement to put legislation on the book, one state at a time at this point. And if you happen to live in one of these states, you have an opportunity to basically express to your congressperson what you feel about the laws that are being proposed or have been proposed in the past. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the end user license agreement that comes with anything that you buy nowadays. This could include your phone, your computer, your car. I mean, anything that you get nowadays. And as we move towards a world where everything involves technology in some aspect, what we already know is that people don't generally tend to read these license agreements. And this is very unfortunate, but also not really realistic to expect someone to do unless they are a lawyer with a lot of time on their hands. And I've said this before. What a lot of people don't realize is that when you buy, let's say, a laptop and it is running Windows 10 or it is running the latest version of iOS, you may own the equipment, but you are not going to be able to own the operating system. So if you have Windows on your computer, you do not own Windows 10. You have signed an agreement with Microsoft, digitally or otherwise, that says that you are going to agree with whatever terms they put forth in that agreement. And some of those terms are borderline, if not completely unreasonable, but because no one ever reads those terms, they're going to agree with them by default. And this is quite unfortunate. And again, it could be very easy for Apple or Samsung or any other company to write in unreasonable terms. And for the most part, people are going to agree with it without ever taking a second look. Now, if you look at this historically, back in 2012, there was a decision made by the Library of Congress that meant cell phone unlocking became a violation of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So in other words, not only do you not own the operating system on your phone, but at that time, the Library of Congress determined that you cannot remove the network lock that is installed on your phone by default. So if you own an AT&T phone and you wanted to put it on another carrier, let's say T-Mobile, or let's say you wanted to travel outside of the country and use a foreign SIM card in your phone, if your phone was network locked to AT&T, the Library of Congress decided that you do not have the right to remove that lock. Only your carrier does, and they can determine if and when they're going to allow you to do that. Now, fortunately, there was a successful petition that overturned that decision and gave us the right to remove any carrier restrictions from our phones. And this happened just a couple years ago. So as I mentioned earlier, these laws tend to move very slowly, and sometimes they make some very ridiculous decisions, usually in favor or not in the favor of the consumer. And this is something that we really want to see not happening anymore. So back in 2013, they also decided that if you own an Apple product and you want to jailbreak it, that's okay as long as it's a phone. So if you're not familiar with it, jailbreaking basically means that you can take your device and alter the operating system in a way that you're allowed to install applications that are not purchased from the App Store. So if you want to buy an application from a third party that doesn't go through Apple, technically you can do that on your phone, but you cannot do it on an iPod or an iPad, which I don't really understand. But I have to assume it has something to do with the fact that a telephone or a cell phone falls into a different category when it comes to a legal definition, and again, is encompassed by the term public utility. So this is very important because when we're dealing with public utilities, it's really a big deal for us to have access to remedies if we run into a problem with that utility or that device that we're using for that type of service. Now, historically, we've had this type of legislation proposed and passed for all sorts of different things. Automobiles, for one. If you have a problem with your car, you don't have to take it back to the manufacturer or to the dealer that sold it to you in order to have it repaired. I mean, how ridiculous would it be if you bought a set of tires from, I don't know, Michelin, and you had to go to Michelin to have them repair the tires? Like, you weren't allowed to let anyone else fix your flat tire except for them. It sounds ridiculous, right? And I know I'm making a very extreme example, but when you think about it, we have been fixing phones for the last 20 years. And it hasn't caused anyone to go out of business. To my knowledge, no one has experienced any severe injuries by working on a phone, but I have a feeling that when these manufacturers go to debate against the right to repair movement, they're going to have some examples where they say, this could be dangerous for the public if they had this available to them, the ability to repair their own phones or to take their phone to a service center where, again, we've been doing this for the last 20 years at least, and they're going to have an argument that says that they don't think that it's a good idea for that to happen. Now, this has been going on in other industries as well. One of them is farming. So we have farmers that buy very expensive pieces of farm equipment, and they can't just go get it fixed because they don't have the information that is required in order to service that piece of equipment. And we're talking about people who produce and deliver, or make available food for the majority of the country. A lot of the food that we eat, that we put on our tables every day, comes from farmers who are going to be put into a position, or already have been put in a position, where they've got to wait until the next available appointment with a manufacturer, pay whatever price the manufacturer deems is appropriate to have their equipment fixed if they are unable to do it themselves, and if they are unable to find someone else who has the capability to do so. So for the most part, as it is, if you're a farmer and you have a problem with your tractor, you may be at the mercy of that company that you bought that tractor from. Now, why would it not be a good idea for anyone to have a right to repair their equipment? Well, there's one big factor here that makes a difference, and that is having qualified technicians available. So if you've ever had your phone repaired by someone else, you might have found out that not all repair shops are equal. So and currently there's really no standard to define who is qualified and who isn't. We have all sorts of certifications issued by private companies. We have all sorts of very loosely defined programs like level 1, level 2, level 3. But for the most part, that definition is left open to the person who is delivering that particular program. So there is no state certification. There is no nationwide certification for you to be deemed qualified to work on anything. And that's probably something that needs to be addressed. So in that aspect, I can understand it, but still, does that mean that it's not okay for you to make an attempt to repair your phone? For you to be able to take it to a third party that you've decided that, hey, you know what, I trust these guys well enough that I think I'm willing to take the risk involved with allowing them to work on my phone. Well, are you willing to take your vehicle to a mechanic that does not work for and has not been certified by one particular company? It probably depends on the repair, right? But for the most part, if we're talking about something like replacing a screen on a cell phone, for the most part, with rare exception, this isn't a big deal. It's not something that you've got to go to school for 2 years to be good enough to do. I mean, I can train someone in a day as far as working on just about every Apple device that they're likely to encounter. So to say that you have this this high bar of qualifications that are required to work on your phones, that is not really going to be the case when it comes to the basic repairs, at least. Now, there is an argument also that there would be a revenue effect on manufacturers, and I understand this. If you make a product and you are not the only person who's allowed to service it, you're going to lose some money. But is that a good reason to tell people that they shouldn't be allowed to or have access to the materials that are necessary to repair this product? I really don't see that as a good argument, and I hope that it's not one that anyone else sees as a good argument. One of the problems with this idea is that a lot of the repairs that people need are not offered by the manufacturers. And I don't mean to pick on Apple, because it's not just Apple, but I want to give you a good example. And Apple works well because they do have repair centers. They have stores that you can go to and get your phone serviced. But a lot of the repairs that you may need for your phone are not offered by Apple, and they're not offered by any other company. Let me give you an example. If you have liquid damage on your phone and you take it to Apple, they are not going to repair your phone. They may offer you some sort of exchange. They may give you a discounted price on a replacement unit, but they are not going to fix your wet cell phone. Neither is Samsung, neither is any other major manufacturer that I'm aware of. So for the most part, if you've got a phone and you've got information on that phone that you need to have access to, and you don't have it backed up somewhere, or you just recently created that information, you haven't had time to back it up, if your phone gets wet or physically damaged, it is generally not going to be repaired, depending on how extensive that damage may be. If your frame is bent at all on your iPhone, Apple is not going to repair the phone, even if it's something very simple, because they don't want to put their product back out there knowing that it is not back to their specification, which is understandable, but does not justify them saying that no one else can work on their phones. And again, I understand they want to protect their reputation. They don't want to have a phone repaired to a standard that does not reflect the quality that they want to see go back out on the street. But at the same time, in many cases, if you bring your phone in and have it replaced, you're going to be walking away with a refurbished unit. So again, they have their own standards for testing quality, and we have ours. And this is going to vary from one shop to another. And the disappointing thing is that a lot of shops don't have a very high standard of quality, but there are exceptional shops that have a higher standard of quality for repairs than even Apple has. So to rule those out and just say, you've got to go to Apple and do whatever they think is right is a disservice to the public. The most ridiculous argument I've heard so far is that there is a potential danger based on lithium ion batteries catching on fire. And this is silly, okay? To try to take advantage of something that's been in the news recently, with the Samsung Galaxy Note 7s, this is insane. Out of all the repair shops that I've ever worked in, out of all the people that I know that work in repair stores throughout the country, even some out overseas, throughout the world, I have not one time heard of a person being injured because they tried to remove the lithium battery from their phone. And if you don't want people to become injured by lithium batteries, make them more stable, or don't make them so difficult to remove from the phone. That is the worst argument I've heard for why we shouldn't have a right to repair lithium ion batteries. Okay, remember when Tesla had a problem with their lithium ion battery and they thought that the car might explode when you drove over a rock? Did they tell you that you can no longer drive the car? No, they fixed the problem. They reinforced the area under the car so that the battery doesn't explode. Manufacturers, if your battery is very difficult to remove from the phone, obviously there is an increased risk of damaging the battery. So why is everyone moving this direction? Maybe it's to protect themselves from people who want to be able to repair their own phones. I really don't know. I'm just guessing at this point. But there's a better solution than saying, no, you're not allowed to work on your phone. That's just insane. Lithium ion battery, because the number of people that have been injured by lithium ion batteries, I would venture to say, is probably a lot less than people who are bitten by sharks or struck by lightning at this point. Now, if we don't have a right to repair our phones, what else do we not have a right to repair? Should that include cars and bicycles? What about a ceiling fan? I work on my ceiling fan all the time. I've got 110 volts running through that thing. And I am, I've decided that I'm okay with accepting the risk involved in working on this electronic device that could potentially do a lot more harm to me than my phone. And, a long time ago, we used to have a saying that you don't hear too much anymore. They used to say, hey, it's a free country. You can do what you want to. Well, obviously, it's not 100% that way anymore, unfortunately. And it seems like we're losing more rights nowadays than we're gaining. So this is one that I feel really strongly about, that we need to stand up and say something about. And I can't wait until some sort of legislation is proposed in California. Right now, this is not one of the states that has something like that. But when we do, I can guarantee you I will be there to, and this won't be the last time I talk about this, because this is very important. Again, this is what I do for a living, and for someone to not go along or, to argue against this idea that we have the right to repair our own devices is just incredibly short-sighted and restrictive. And there are a number of other things that I don't even want to get into because this is running a little longer than I planned. But, with the internet of everything and devices that we're working with, eventually everything around us is going to contain digital or intellectual property of some sort. And if that means that we have to accept that every time we have a problem, we have to go back to the manufacturer to get service. And this is what I wanted to lead up to here. how long can you live without your phone? Because there may not be an Apple store right down the street from you. There may not be one for several hundred miles away from you. If you're dealing with something like Samsung or any other brand that doesn't have a retail store for you to visit or a service center for you to take your phone to, how long do you want to wait to send in your phone, have them repair it, and send it back to you? It's ridiculous. We have a Galaxy Note 7 that we sent into Samsung back in December. Haven't heard back from them. And this is just for a refund. This isn't even repair. This is just to get a refund on the device that was defective or recalled or whatever the correct term was. So if you want to take your phone and put it into an overnight express container and ship it out to the manufacturer and wait for them to send it back to you, in that case, I'd say maybe you're okay with not having a right to repair. But for anyone else who feels like, you know what, if I want to walk down the street or drive down the street to a phone repair shop and hand them my phone and have it back in 30 minutes to an hour with no appointment necessary, I implore you to support and to speak up and contact your congressperson about the right to repair legislation if there's anything in your state or if you live in one of the states where this is an option. Now, what happens if the right to repair movement fails? Well, probably not a lot of things will change. For the most part, technicians are going to continue to use whatever resources are available to them. So what that means is that there will be a lot of people out there who say, I am not willing to wait to send my phone in and have it mailed back to me. So I am going to go to the phone repair store that is closest, and I'm going to use whatever parts and whatever information they have available to them to remedy my situation. So this whole idea that being restrictive about who has access to parts and information to service phones is basically going to backfire, in my opinion, on manufacturers, because if they're trying to uphold a standard of quality for their devices once they are repaired, by forcing people basically into, almost the equivalent of a black market when it comes to buying replacement parts and leaving it for us to figure out how to fix things and make them work again, is a huge disservice to your customers, to the people that you're selling your devices to. I can understand having some restrictions or some requisites for people that want to become authorized to repair your devices. And by the way, there's really no authorized anything out there. A lot of people will put this little thing on their business card that says Apple authorized. Well, Apple does not authorize anyone to fix phones. So if you see that sign hanging on someone's business, or you see it on their business card, or they're advertising themselves that way, you might want to let them or recommend that they check with Apple and see what it is exactly that they are authorized to repair, because that's kind of a joke within the industry, in case you, for anyone who's on the outside. So again, it would be in their best interest not only to provide access to parts and information, but also maybe to have a program where you can sign up and really legitimately become authorized to service phones and tablets. All right, so there are multiple states proposing or at least considering legislation to protect your right to repair your phone, computer, refrigerator, tractor, dishwasher, whatever it is. The list goes on. So if you want to help and if you want to have access, or you want third parties to have access to the parts and the information that is necessary to repair a lot of the devices that you're living with, that you're using right now, please contact your congressperson and let them know how you feel. Politicians are hopefully starting to understand that if they don't listen to what we have to say, they will be voted out of office. And so now is the time to speak up and be heard. For details, you can visit repair.org/stand-up, or just go to the repair.org site and get more information about what this whole movement is about. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk about this again, and I'll be back on Friday. By the way, all of this goes into an audio podcast that is published on my website. That's gocellphonerepair.com/podcast. If you don't want to look at this the whole time, you can just listen to what I have to say. And again, thanks for joining me.